Hello. Today is all about boundaries, personal boundaries. So do you know what a personal boundary is? And do you have personal boundaries that you know about? It's a favourite topic of mine because personal boundaries are there to keep us safe, secure and content. So we all know what a physical boundary is. We will know about them when we're in a queue, when we're in a crowded area. Maybe we want some space around us. We don't want people brushing next to us. Maybe we don't mind, but we will know where our limits on our personal space are. But the internal personal boundaries are more about saying no instead of yes sometimes. Saying what you want, going back to needs, which is why we've looked at needs first, because if we've got a need, then in order to get it met, we may need to put boundaries in place. So at work, for example, or an arena of something like that, we will know that we do X amount of hours, we give our skills and our time for X amount of pay and perks, etc. So when we are asked to do extra work for nothing, without extra money or perks, it's up to us whether we're going to do that willingly or not, and we have a right to say no. Now, this can be quite difficult for people pleasers and people that find it hard to say no, who like to say yes and keep everybody happy. But there is where it's most important to have personal boundaries, because we can be taken advantage of, or more importantly, we can feel taken advantage of. If we always say yes, or we always do things for someone, or we do things a certain way, when we get to a point of, oh, I think I'm being taken advantage of, we have to look at it from 2 points of view. Yes, it's possible the person is taking advantage of us, but who's allowed that to happen? It would be us. Because if we keep giving and the other person keeps taking, then it would be up to us to stop giving so freely. Because habits form, and a lot of the time we're not actually being taken for granted or taken advantage of in a horrible way. Sometimes that can be the case, but often it's not, and it's just the way that the habit is formed. People think, oh, I can always go to that person for help or for advice, and therefore they do. So sometimes we have to look at what we're giving out, and are we happy to do that? When we're feeling negative about a certain person or a certain organisation, for example, we can think about these questions. Is it something that they're doing that's making us feel this way? Is it something within me that's making me feel this way? Or is it a mixture of both? A little bit like the triangle of thought, feeling and behaviour, if we can understand what's going on, we know where to get in there and make a change that's going to work for us better. And everybody needs boundaries, from children to the elderly. Everyone. We have them to keep safe and away from abuse. We have them to feel content with our lives, and that we're in control of our lives and what we're willing to do and not willing to do, or the path that we're on. And sometimes we need to change boundaries. Changing boundaries needs to be done very subtly and slowly if changing the boundary is going to involve other people or affect other people. The reason for this is if we see a change in someone but we're not sure what it is, or we can see what it is, either, we might not be so happy because it's affecting us, even if the new way of being is better for that person. And this might happen to us if we're changing a boundary. We can't always expect that other people are going to be happy for our changes if it affects them in any way. It's great when they do, and many people around us that care about us will be happy for us that we're carving out boundaries and making new ways of living. But we have to be aware that whatever we do can affect others, and we have to bring that into the scenario as well as how we're going to change the boundaries ourselves. So I'd like to give you an example of where we can try to put a boundary in that affects other people, they don't like it, and that affects us keeping our boundaries going, or could do. So we had a mum of 2 teenage sons. She's been mollycoddling them happily for a long time, but they're old enough to do some things for themselves. She decided she's going to hold back on a few things for them. They were really disgruntled for quite a long time and even accused her of not being mum anymore. But she continued through it. She continued to not only help them to see that they can do some things for themselves, which is good for them and their growing up, but also it was good for her because they were finally doing some things and helping her out. So have a little think about your own personal boundaries and what they might be. It's good to identify them. And also to identify if you're not happy with certain scenarios, what can you do about it to make you feel better and to get your needs met in that area. A few questions I'd like to ask you, and then perhaps pause the video after to think about these things, write some notes down, because it will give you a good idea of where you're at in life right now. So, do you have boundaries? Do you know what boundaries you have and with who or what? Making personal boundaries can be harder if you've never learnt to in childhood, if you don't know how to already, but you can do it. How often do you say yes when you mean no? How often do you say yes to something and then think, oh, I've got that in the diary, I really don't want to go, I wish I'd said no, I've made myself too busy, etc., etc. How often do you resent doing something that you said yes to when you meant no? So that's the next level, when resentment comes up. The resentment cannot be towards the person or people you said yes to. We have to take responsibility when we say yes, and that's why we have to think about it before we do. Take a moment. Do I want to say yes? Or do I really want to say no? Or do I want to keep it open? If we can voice our needs to others, such as I'll think about it, I'll let you know next week, or could I keep it open, then everybody knows what the score is, and you will feel happier with that. Do you ever feel taken for granted? So I spoke about this earlier. Being taken for granted. They take me for granted. But we have to look at what we're putting out willingly. Or sometimes unwillingly, but if we're doing it, we're doing it. So are we actually being taken for granted, or are we just giving too much? So do these things sound familiar to you? Pause the video and write a few things down about your personal boundaries. So our social systems, wider community, the world can get in the way of us having our personal boundaries, in a sense. We feel we should, that word again, do certain things and do them a certain way. Also, dominating people that don't take no for an answer. We need to be careful that we keep our boundaries around people that want to control us, or salespeople, for example, want to sell us something and they're really pushy. But one of the biggest reasons we don't put personal boundaries in place are our thoughts. So let's look at a few thoughts that can get in the way. If I don't say yes, they won't like me. Is that true? If I don't say yes, they will think I'm selfish. If I don't say yes, I will lose my job. I've heard all of these things, the first two particularly, a lot from clients. Do you ever think those things yourself? So I encourage you wholeheartedly to go forth, look at your needs, get them met as far as you can, and put boundaries in place where you need them. Without boundaries, we can feel discontent, unsafe, and insecure. And this can lead to anxiety, low mood, anger, frustration, upset. And that's why they are so important. So that rounds up today's session. And I'll see you in the next session. Take care and bye for now.